Welcome to One Book, One Coffee, where we dive deep into the books that shape minds and change lives. If you're here watching this, you're already different from most people. While others are scrolling through endless feeds or binge-watching their nights away, you've made a conscious choice to invest in something that will actually grow you as a person. That says something remarkable about who you are and who you're becoming. Today, we're exploring The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, a book that has quietly transformed over 150 million lives across the globe. This isn't just another novel. It's a philosophical guide disguised as a simple story about a shepherd boy. What makes this book extraordinary is how it speaks to that universal human longing, the pull we all feel towards something greater, something we can't quite name but know is calling us. Will Smith has called it one of his favorite books, saying it helped him understand his purpose. Madonna gifted copies to her friends, and countless entrepreneurs credit it with giving them courage to pursue their dreams. Paulo Coelho wrote this masterpiece after his own spiritual awakening. As a young man, he was institutionalized 3 times by his parents for wanting to be a writer instead of following a conventional path. He spent years searching, traveling, exploring different spiritual traditions, working odd jobs, until he walked the ancient pilgrimage route to Santiago de Compostela. That journey cracked something open in him, and The Alchemist poured out in just 2 weeks. It was initially rejected by publishers and sold only 900 copies in its first year. Today, it's one of the most translated books in history. Now, a quick note before we dive in. This is a detailed chapter-by-chapter walkthrough, so it's going to be a longer session. Take your time with it. There's no rush. If you need to step away, save this video to your watch later or forward the link to yourself on WhatsApp so you can pick up right where you left off. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's walk through this book together chapter by chapter, idea by idea. Let's begin. A shepherd boy's quest for treasure becomes humanity's guide to finding purpose and following dreams against all odds. Paulo Coelho's path to writing The Alchemist was itself an alchemical transformation. From a young man institutionalized for his dreams to a spiritual seeker who walked ancient pilgrimage routes until his purpose crystallized into one of the world's most beloved books. Picture this. You're settling into your favorite coffee shop corner, steam rising from your cup, and I'm about to tell you about one of the most profound opening chapters in literature. We're diving into Paulo Coelho's masterpiece, The Alchemist, and specifically that haunting recurring dream that changes everything for a young shepherd named Santiago. Now, imagine being 19 years old, living a simple life herding sheep across the Spanish countryside, and suddenly the same dream keeps visiting you night after night. Santiago dreams of a child who takes him to the Egyptian pyramids and tells him there's treasure waiting for him there. But here's the thing that makes your skin crawl a little. Every time the child is about to reveal the exact location of this treasure, Santiago wakes up. Every single time. Have you ever had one of those dreams that feels so real, so urgent, that you wake up with your heart pounding? That's Santiago's reality, except this dream won't leave him alone. Think about this for a moment. How many times in your own life have you had a persistent feeling, an idea that keeps knocking at the door of your consciousness? Maybe it's that business idea you keep pushing aside, or the creative project that haunts your quiet moments, or even that person you keep thinking about calling. Santiago's dream is Coelho's brilliant metaphor for those whispers from our soul that we often dismiss as mere fantasy. But Santiago does something most of us don't. He takes action. He seeks out a gypsy woman in the nearby town of Caravan, hoping she can interpret his dream. Now, here's where the story gets deliciously complex. The gypsy woman listens to his dream and immediately declares that he must go to Egypt to find his treasure. She's so confident that she asks for 1/10 of the treasure as payment for her interpretation. But Santiago, like most of us when faced with life-changing advice, feels skeptical. This old woman is telling him to abandon his comfortable, predictable life as a shepherd and journey across continents based on a dream. This moment captures something so fundamentally human about our relationship with destiny. We ask for signs, we seek guidance, but when it arrives, often in the most unexpected packages, we question its validity. The gypsy woman represents that voice of ancient wisdom that exists in every culture, the elder who sees patterns we cannot yet perceive. In our modern world, this might be the mentor who encourages you to take that leap, the friend who sees your potential before you do, or even that inner voice that keeps nudging you toward something greater. What's fascinating about Santiago's reaction is how it mirrors our own resistance to transformation. He's comfortable with his sheep, his routine, his predictable income. Sound familiar? How many of us stay in jobs, relationships, or situations that feel safe but leave us spiritually hungry? The shepherd's life is a beautiful metaphor for any existence where we're going through the motions, following well-worn paths, but not truly living our purpose. The gypsy woman's interpretation forces Santiago to confront a fundamental question that haunts every human heart. What if our dreams are not just random neurological firings, but actual messages about our destiny? In today's world, where we're often told to be practical, to follow conventional wisdom, to play it safe, Sealho is asking us to consider that our deepest longings might actually be our most reliable compass. Consider how this applies to your own life right now. That recurring thought about changing careers, moving to a new city, learning a new skill, or pursuing a creative passion. What if it's not just wishful thinking? What if it's your personal legend calling to you, just as Santiago's dream called to him? The gypsy woman doesn't offer Santiago a guarantee of success. She simply confirms that his dream has meaning and deserves to be pursued. The beauty of this opening sequence is how it establishes the central tension of the entire book. The battle between security and possibility, between the known and the unknown, between living a safe life and living a meaningful one. Santiago's dream is persistent precisely because it represents something essential about his nature that cannot be ignored forever. As we continue this journey together through The Alchemist, we'll see how Santiago's decision to trust his dream sets in motion a series of events that will transform not just his external circumstances, but his entire understanding of what it means to be alive. The recurring dream and the gypsy's interpretation are just the beginning of a much larger conversation about listening to our hearts and having the courage to follow where they lead us. Picture this. You're sitting in a small Spanish town square, maybe nursing your morning coffee, when an old man approaches you and claims to be a king. Your first instinct would probably be to politely excuse yourself and find somewhere else to sit, right? But what if that old man knew things about you that no stranger should know? What if he could read your thoughts, your dreams, your deepest desires? This is exactly what happens to Santiago when he encounters Melchizedek, the mysterious king of Salem, and it's where our shepherd boy's real journey begins. Now, think about this for a moment. We've all had those encounters, haven't we? Those seemingly random meetings with people who appear in our lives at exactly the right moment, armed with exactly the wisdom we need to hear. Maybe it was a teacher who believed in you when no one else did, or a stranger on a train who shared a story that changed your perspective forever. Sealho understands something profound about these encounters. They're rarely accidents. Melchizedek doesn't waste time with small talk. He cuts straight to the heart of Santiago's dilemma with a concept that will echo throughout the entire story, the personal legend. Now, before you roll your eyes thinking this sounds like some New Age mumbo-jumbo, consider what he's really talking about. Your personal legend isn't some mystical destiny written in the stars. It's that thing you dreamed about doing when you were young, before the world convinced you to be practical, before bills and responsibilities and other people's expectations clouded your vision. The old king explains it beautifully. When we're children, we know what we want from life, but as we grow older, a mysterious force convinces us that it's impossible to achieve our dreams. Think about your own childhood for a second. What did you want to be? An astronaut, an artist, a world traveler? What happened to those dreams? For most of us, they got buried under layers of "be realistic," and that's not a real job and you need security. But here's where Melchizedek drops a bombshell that still gives me chills every time I think about it. When you really want something, all the universe conspires in helping you achieve it. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds like wishful thinking, doesn't it? But before you dismiss it, consider how many times you've experienced this phenomenon yourself. You know those moments when you're passionate about something and suddenly opportunities start appearing everywhere. When the right people show up at the right time. When resources you didn't know existed become available. This isn't magic, it's psychology and physics working together in ways we're only beginning to understand. When you're truly committed to something, your brain starts noticing opportunities that were always there but previously invisible. You begin taking actions, however small, that create ripple effects. You attract people who resonate with your energy and purpose. The universe doesn't literally conspire to help you, but your focused intention creates a kind of gravitational pull that draws possibilities toward you. Melchizedek also introduces Santiago to the concept of beginner's luck, and this is where things get really interesting. He explains that when people first set out toward their personal legend, they experience a period where everything seems to go their way. The universe wants to show them that it's possible, that their dreams aren't just foolish fantasies. But here's the catch. This is also when the universe starts testing their commitment. Think about any new venture you've started. Remember that initial honeymoon period when everything felt exciting and possible. Maybe you started a new business and your first few customers came easily, or you began learning a new skill and made rapid progress. That's beginner's luck in action. But then what happened? Things got harder, didn't they? Obstacles appeared. Doubts crept in. This is the universe's way of asking, how badly do you really want this? The king tells Santiago something that every dreamer needs to hear. The world's greatest lie is that at a certain point in our lives, we lose control over what happens to us, and our lives become controlled by fate. This is revolutionary thinking disguised as ancient wisdom. In our modern world, we're constantly bombarded with messages that we're victims of circumstance, that success is for other people, that we should be grateful for whatever scraps life throws our way. But Melchizedek is saying something entirely different. He's saying that giving up on your personal legend is a choice, not an inevitability. Every day, we make hundreds of small decisions that either move us closer to our dreams or further away from them. The shepherd who settles for the familiar pastures versus the shepherd who sets out for the pyramids. Both are making choices, and both will live with the consequences of those choices. As Santiago prepares to leave this encounter forever changed, we're reminded that transformation often begins with a single conversation, a moment of recognition, a choice to believe that maybe, just maybe, our dreams are worth pursuing after all. The question isn't whether you have a personal legend, everyone does. The question is whether you're brave enough to pursue it. Picture this. You've just stepped off a boat in a foreign country, your pockets full of dreams and the money you've saved from selling your sheep. The sun is beating down on the bustling port of Tangier, and everywhere you look, there's chaos, noise, and the intoxicating promise of adventure. This is exactly where Santiago finds himself, and what happens next is going to teach him one of life's most brutal yet necessary lessons. Now think about this for a moment. How many times have you been in a situation where you felt completely out of your depth? Maybe it was your first day at a new job, moving to a different city, or simply trying something you'd never done before. Santiago is experiencing that feeling multiplied by 1,000. He doesn't speak Arabic, he doesn't understand the customs, and he's carrying everything he owns in the world with him. It's like being dropped into a video game where you don't know the rules, and everyone else seems to be playing at expert level. The theft itself happens with devastating simplicity. Santiago meets a young man who speaks Spanish, and suddenly he feels like he's found a lifeline in this sea of confusion. This stranger offers to help him navigate to the pyramids, and Santiago, desperate for guidance and friendship, places his trust completely in this person. It's such a human response, isn't it? When we're scared and alone, we gravitate toward anyone who seems to offer comfort or understanding. The young man takes Santiago through the crowded marketplace, supposedly to arrange transportation. And in what feels like a heartbeat, Santiago's money is gone and his newfound friend has vanished into the crowd like smoke. Can you imagine that sinking feeling? That moment when reality crashes down and you realize you've been completely fooled. It's like when you get that email saying you've won $1 million, and even though you know better, some small part of you hopes it might be real until you lose money to the scam. Santiago experiences this on a scale that would crush most of us. He's not just lost some pocket change. He's lost everything that represented his ability to pursue his dream. But here's where Coelho's genius really shines through, and why this story resonates so powerfully with modern readers. Santiago doesn't just sit there and feel sorry for himself, though he certainly has every right to. Instead, he begins to understand something profound about the nature of learning and growth. The old king, Melchizedek, had warned him that the universe would test his resolve, that it would put obstacles in his path to see if he truly wanted his personal legend. At first, Santiago probably thought this was just poetic language, but now he's living it. Think about the last time something really challenging happened to you. Maybe you lost a job, went through a breakup, or had a business venture fail. In that moment, it probably felt like the end of the world. But looking back now, can you see how that experience taught you something valuable? How it forced you to develop resilience, creativity, or a deeper understanding of yourself? This is exactly what's happening to Santiago, except he's learning it in real time. The theft forces Santiago to confront a fundamental question that we all face. When life knocks you down, do you give up and go back to what's safe and familiar, or do you find a way to keep moving forward? He could easily return to Spain, buy more sheep, and pretend this whole adventure never happened. Many people would choose exactly that path, and nobody would blame him. There's comfort in the familiar, in the life we know, even if it's not the life we dream of. But Santiago makes a different choice, and this is where the real magic of personal transformation begins. He starts to see his situation not as a disaster, but as a teacher. He realizes that he's learned more about himself and the world in this one devastating moment than he did in years of shepherding. The theft becomes his first real lesson in what it means to be truly alive, to be engaged with the world rather than just passing through it safely. This connects so beautifully to our modern understanding of resilience and growth mindset. Researchers today talk about how our greatest learning often comes from our most difficult experiences, how adversity can be a catalyst for developing capabilities we never knew we had. Santiago is discovering this ancient wisdom through direct experience, and as we follow his journey, we're invited to examine our own relationship with setbacks and challenges. As Santiago stands in that marketplace, penniless but somehow not broken, he's beginning to understand that his personal legend isn't just about reaching the pyramids. It's about becoming the person who's capable of making that journey, and sometimes that requires losing everything you think you need in order to discover what you actually have. Picture this. You've just lost everything you thought mattered, standing in a foreign land where you don't speak the language, with nothing but the clothes on your back. Most of us would panic, maybe book the first flight home, or at least spend hours on the phone crying to family. But here's Santiago, our young shepherd, doing something extraordinary. He's choosing to see this devastating setback as the beginning of his real education. When Santiago walks into that crystal shop in Tangier, dusty and defeated after being robbed of all his money, he's not just looking for work. He's unknowingly stepping into what will become one of the most transformative chapters of his journey. The crystal merchant, this weathered man who's been running the same shop for 30 years, represents something we all recognize: the person who's let fear slowly calcify their dreams into routine. Now think about this for a moment. How many of us have become crystal merchants in our own lives? We start with big dreams, maybe we even take a few steps toward them, but then life happens. Bills pile up, responsibilities multiply, and before we know it, we're polishing the same crystals day after day, telling ourselves we're being practical, being responsible. The crystal merchant once dreamed of making the pilgrimage to Mecca. It was his personal legend, his deepest calling. But year after year, he found reasons to postpone it. The shop needed him. He needed to save more money. Maybe next year would be better. Santiago's arrival disrupts this carefully constructed world of limitation. Within his first day, this young foreigner who doesn't even speak Arabic manages to sell more crystals than the merchant typically sells in weeks. How? By suggesting they clean the dusty display cases and serve tea to customers. Simple ideas, but revolutionary in their context. The boy brings what we might call beginner's mind, that fresh perspective that sees possibilities where experience only sees obstacles. This is where Coelho drops one of his most profound insights about how change really works. Santiago doesn't transform the crystal shop through grand gestures or complex strategies. He does it through small, thoughtful improvements. He learns Arabic not in a classroom, but through the daily necessity of communication. He understands the rhythm of the shop, the needs of the customers, the dreams buried deep in his employer's heart. And slowly, patiently, he begins to breathe life back into a business that had been quietly dying for years. The year Santiago spends in that shop becomes a masterclass in what we might call practical mysticism. He's not just learning Arabic or sales techniques. He's learning to read the language of the world itself. He starts noticing omens, those subtle signs and synchronicities that most of us dismiss as coincidence. A customer who lingers over a particular crystal, the way the light hits the display case at certain times of day, the feeling in the air that tells him when someone's ready to buy something special. But here's what makes this chapter so relevant to our modern lives. Santiago is essentially learning what we now call emotional intelligence, market awareness, and cultural competency, all wrapped up in the ancient wisdom of paying attention. In our age of data analytics and market research, we sometimes forget that the most powerful insights come from simply observing, listening, and responding to what people actually need. The crystal merchant becomes Santiago's unwitting teacher in one of life's hardest lessons, the difference between dreaming and doing. The merchant knows everything about crystals, has perfected his craft, even speaks wistfully about Mecca. But knowledge without action becomes a beautiful prison. Santiago watches this man who has everything he needs to pursue his dream, except the courage to begin. Meanwhile, Santiago is quietly building his own courage. Every conversation in Arabic, every successful sale, every small improvement to the shop becomes a deposit in his confidence account. He's not just earning money for his journey to Egypt, he's earning something far more valuable: the knowledge that he can adapt, learn, and thrive anywhere the world takes him. As the year unfolds, we see Santiago grappling with a temptation that faces every dreamer: the comfort of settling. The crystal merchant offers him partnership, security, a known future. It's not a bad life, it's actually quite good. But good can be the enemy of great, and Santiago is beginning to understand that his personal legend isn't just calling him toward the pyramids of Egypt, it's calling him toward the person he's meant to become. This sets up the beautiful tension that drives the rest of our story. Will Santiago choose the safe harbor of the crystal shop, or will he trust the wind that's calling him toward his treasure? Picture yourself standing at the edge of a cliff, looking out at an endless horizon. Behind you lies everything familiar, everything safe, everything you've ever known. Ahead stretches the vast unknown, filled with possibilities that both terrify and exhilarate you. This is exactly where Santiago finds himself in Paulo Coelho's masterpiece, and it's exactly where each of us stands multiple times throughout our lives. You know that moment, don't you? When you're holding a job offer that would mean moving to a new city, when you're considering starting your own business, when you're thinking about ending a relationship that's comfortable but not fulfilling. That moment when your heart whispers go, but your mind screams stay. Santiago faces this precise crossroads, and watching him navigate it teaches us something profound about the nature of choice itself. Here's what's fascinating about Santiago's decision-making process. He doesn't have a spreadsheet. He doesn't have a mentor giving him step-by-step advice. He doesn't even have Google to research the best path forward. What he has is something far more powerful and far more terrifying: the weight of his own dreams pressing against the gravity of conventional wisdom. The old king Melchizedek has planted a seed in his mind about personal legends and treasure, but now Santiago must choose whether to water that seed or let it wither in the comfortable soil of predictability. Think about this for a moment. How often do we receive signs, opportunities, or callings that we dismiss because they don't fit into our neat little life plans? Santiago could easily return to his sheep, to his routine, to the girl he's been thinking about marrying. There's nothing wrong with that life. It's honest work, it's stable, it provides security. But here's the thing that Silho understands so beautifully. Sometimes the greatest risk isn't in chasing your dreams, it's in not chasing them. The shepherd boy's internal struggle mirrors something we see everywhere in modern life. Consider the software engineer who dreams of opening a bakery, the lawyer who wants to write novels, the accountant who fantasizes about traveling the world as a photographer. Each of these people stands at their own version of Santiago's crossroads. They can choose the known path, the safe path, the path that makes sense to everyone around them, or they can choose the path that makes sense only to their heart. Now, what's particularly brilliant about how Silho presents this decision is that he doesn't romanticize it. Santiago isn't some reckless adventurer throwing caution to the wind. He's genuinely torn. He counts his money, he thinks about the practical implications, he weighs the costs. This isn't about being impulsive, it's about being intentional. There's a world of difference between those two approaches. I'm reminded of a friend who spent 3 years in a corporate job she hated, saving money and planning, before she finally quit to start her own design studio. People called her crazy for leaving a 6-figure salary, but she understood something crucial. She wasn't abandoning security, she was investing in a different kind of security, the security that comes from aligning your life with your deepest values and dreams. Santiago's decision teaches us that the choice between safety and the unknown isn't really about external circumstances at all. It's about internal courage. It's about whether we trust ourselves enough to handle whatever comes next. The sheep, the familiar pastures, the predictable routine, these aren't just Santiago's comfort zone, they're his prison bars. And the beautiful irony is that he's the one holding the key. Consider how this plays out in our digital age. We have more opportunities than ever before to pursue unconventional paths. You can start a business from your laptop, learn new skills online, connect with like-minded people across the globe. Yet somehow, many of us feel more trapped than ever in lives that don't reflect our authentic selves. Why? Because the real barriers aren't external anymore, they're internal. They're fear, doubt, the voices telling us to be realistic, to think about retirement, to consider what other people will think. Santiago's moment of decision reminds us that every meaningful journey begins with a single choice. The choice to believe that we're worthy of the life we dream about. Not tomorrow, not when we have more money or more time or more confidence, but right now, exactly as we are. The treasure he seeks isn't just gold and jewels, it's the treasure of becoming who he's meant to be. And that treasure, Silho suggests, is available to every single one of us, if we're brave enough to choose the unknown over the familiar, growth over comfort, possibility over certainty. The decision to continue isn't just Santiago's story. It's the universal human story of choosing to trust in something larger than our fears. Picture this. You're at a crossroads in your life, maybe stuck in a job that doesn't fulfill you, or carrying a dream that feels impossibly distant. You know you need to take a leap, but the path ahead seems shrouded in uncertainty. This is exactly where Santiago finds himself as he joins a caravan bound for the Egyptian desert, and it's here that Coelho introduces us to one of literature's most fascinating characters, the Englishman. Now, imagine you're settling into a long journey, perhaps a cross-country road trip or a lengthy flight, and you strike up a conversation with the person next to you. That's essentially what happens when Santiago meets the Englishman. But this isn't just small talk about the weather or complaining about airline food. This encounter becomes a masterclass in how the universe conspires to teach us exactly what we need to learn, exactly when we need to learn it. The Englishman is obsessed with alchemy, and I mean truly obsessed. He's traveled from London to the Egyptian desert, carrying a small library of books about turning base metals into gold, about finding the philosopher's stone, about discovering the elixir of life. Think about someone you know who's completely consumed by their passion. Maybe it's that friend who can talk for hours about cryptocurrency, or the colleague who's read every book on personal development. That's the Englishman, except his passion is this ancient, mystical science that most people would dismiss as medieval nonsense. But here's where Coelho's genius shines through. The Englishman represents something we've all been at some point in our lives, the eternal student, the person who believes that if we just read enough books, attend enough seminars, or collect enough information, we'll finally unlock the secret to success, happiness, or fulfillment. Sound familiar? In our modern world, we're all a bit like the Englishman. We devour self-help books, binge-watch motivational videos, and follow countless experts on social media, convinced that the next piece of information will be the key that unlocks our potential. The beautiful irony is that, while the Englishman has spent years studying alchemy in books, Santiago has been living it without even knowing it. Remember, alchemy isn't really about turning lead into gold, that's just the surface level. At its heart, alchemy is about transformation, about turning the ordinary into the extraordinary, about discovering the magic that already exists within us and around us. Santiago has been doing this from the moment he decided to leave his sheep and pursue his personal legend. Now think about this for a moment. How many times have you met someone who seemed to have all the theoretical knowledge in the world, but struggled to apply it practically? Or conversely, how often have you encountered people who might not have formal education, but possess an intuitive wisdom that cuts straight to the heart of matters? This is the dynamic Coelho sets up between Santiago and the Englishman, and it's playing out in boardrooms, classrooms, and coffee shops all around us every single day. The caravan itself becomes a metaphor for life's journey. You've got all these different people, merchants, guides, travelers, each with their own stories, their own destinations, their own fears about the dangers ahead. It's like any community you've ever been part of, whether it's your workplace, your neighborhood, or even an online group. Everyone's heading in roughly the same direction, but everyone has different reasons for being there and different definitions of what success looks like. What's particularly striking is how the Englishman and Santiago begin to learn from each other. The Englishman starts to see that maybe, just maybe, all his book learning needs to be balanced with practical experience and intuitive understanding. Meanwhile, Santiago begins to understand that his journey isn't just a personal adventure. It's part of something much larger, a universal process of transformation that people have been studying and practicing for centuries. This exchange between them illustrates something profound about how we learn and grow. Sometimes we need the theoretical framework, the maps and guidebooks that help us understand where we're going. Other times, we need to trust our instincts, to feel our way forward, to let experience be our teacher. The magic happens when we can blend both approaches, when we can balance study with practice, planning with spontaneity, knowledge with wisdom. As the caravan moves deeper into the desert, both characters are being prepared for the lessons that lie ahead, lessons that will challenge everything they think they know about themselves and the world around them. Picture this. You're deep into your personal legend, you've faced trials and setbacks, and just when you think you understand what sacrifice means, life throws you the most beautiful curveball imaginable. That's exactly what happens to Santiago when he reaches the oasis. And honestly, it's one of those moments that makes you realize how beautifully complicated this whole journey of following your dreams can become. So Santiago arrives at this oasis in the middle of the desert, and it's like stepping into another world entirely. Think of it as finding an unexpected sanctuary right when you need it most. The oasis represents safety, abundance, and rest after the harsh journey through the desert. But here's where Coelho gets really interesting with his storytelling, because this place of peace becomes the setting for Santiago's greatest test yet. Now imagine you're Santiago, this young shepherd who's been laser-focused on reaching the pyramids and finding his treasure. You've learned about the soul of the world, you've met an alchemist, and you think you've got this whole personal legend thing figured out. Then you see her, Fatima. And in that moment, everything you thought you knew about your journey gets turned completely upside down. The way Coelho describes their meeting is absolutely magical, but what's really fascinating is how he uses this love story to explore something much deeper about human nature and our relationship with our dreams. When Santiago falls in love with Fatima, he's suddenly faced with a choice that millions of people face every single day in the modern world. Do you choose love, or do you choose your career? Do you settle down, or do you keep chasing that big dream? Think about this for a moment. How many people do you know who have had to choose between a relationship and a career opportunity? Maybe it's someone who got offered their dream job in another city but couldn't bear to leave their partner behind. Or perhaps it's someone who gave up on their artistic ambitions because they fell in love and wanted to build a stable life together. This tension between love and personal ambition isn't just an ancient dilemma. It's playing out in coffee shops and living rooms all over the world right now. But here's where Coelho's wisdom really shines through, and why this part of the story hits so differently than your typical romance novel. Fatima doesn't beg Santiago to stay. She doesn't guilt-trip him or make him choose between her and his dreams. Instead, she does something that's both heartbreaking and incredibly wise. She tells him that if he's truly meant for her, he'll return after completing his journey to the pyramids. Now this is revolutionary thinking, especially when you consider how we often approach love in our culture today. We're constantly being told that love means sacrifice, that if you really love someone, you'll give up everything for them. But Fatima represents a different kind of love entirely. She understands something profound about the nature of true love and personal fulfillment. Real love, she suggests, doesn't diminish your dreams, it enhances them. This reminds me of modern couples who support each other's individual growth rather than trying to merge into one identity. Think about those relationships where both partners encourage each other to pursue their passions, even when it means time apart or individual challenges. That's the kind of mature love that Fatima represents, and it's incredibly rare and beautiful. Santiago's struggle with this decision is so relatable because it mirrors the internal battles we all face when life presents us with competing goods. It's not like he's choosing between something good and something bad. He's choosing between two beautiful possibilities, and that's what makes it so agonizing. The treasure represents his personal legend, his individual purpose in the world. Fatima represents love, connection, and the possibility of building a life with another person. What's particularly brilliant about how Coelho handles this dilemma is that he doesn't present it as an either-or situation, even though it feels that way to Santiago at first. The deeper message is that when you're truly aligned with your personal legend, when you're following your authentic path, love becomes part of that journey rather than an obstacle to it. As we transition into the next phase of Santiago's adventure, keep this lesson close to your heart. Sometimes the greatest test of our commitment to our dreams isn't failure or hardship. It's success and love arriving at the most inconvenient possible moment, asking us to trust that the universe has a plan bigger than we can currently see. As we settle deeper into Santiago's remarkable journey, we find ourselves at one of those pivotal moments that changes everything. You know how sometimes in life you suddenly realize you're capable of something you never imagined? That's exactly where our young shepherd finds himself as his understanding of the universal language begins to expand in ways that both terrify and amaze him. Picture Santiago standing in the oasis, no longer the simple shepherd boy who once worried only about his flock's next meal. The desert has been teaching him, the alchemist has been guiding him, and now something extraordinary is about to unfold. It's like watching someone discover they can paint masterpieces after years of believing they could barely draw stick figures. The transformation is both gradual and sudden, built through countless small moments of learning, and then revealed in one stunning instant of clarity. Now think about this for a moment. How many times have you had a gut feeling about something, only to dismiss it as imagination or wishful thinking? Santiago is about to learn that these intuitions, these glimpses beyond the ordinary, are actually windows into a deeper reality that connects all things. It's the same feeling you might get when you think of an old friend just moments before they call, or when you sense something significant is about to happen in your life without knowing exactly what or why. The vision comes to Santiago as he watches the flight of hawks in the desert sky, but this isn't just casual bird watching. As his eyes follow their patterns, something shifts in his consciousness. The hawks begin to speak to him in that universal language he's been learning to understand. They show him images, glimpses of the future that make his blood run cold. He sees armies approaching the oasis, violence threatening this peaceful sanctuary, where hundreds of people have found refuge from the harsh desert world. What strikes me most about this moment is how Coelho illustrates the weight of true insight. It's one thing to wish for special powers or mystical abilities, but it's quite another to actually receive them and realize the responsibility they carry. Santiago doesn't feel excited or proud when the vision comes. Instead, he feels the burden of knowledge, the terrible weight of seeing what others cannot see. It's like being the only person who notices the storm clouds gathering while everyone else enjoys the sunshine. Think about the modern parallels here. We live in a world where information travels at light speed, where data analysts can predict market crashes and scientists can forecast climate changes decades in advance. Yet how often do we see these warnings dismissed or ignored? Santiago's struggle represents that universal human challenge of being a messenger of difficult truths. Whether you're a whistleblower in a corporation, a friend trying to warn someone about a toxic relationship, or simply someone who sees patterns others miss, you understand the isolation that comes with unwanted insight. The beauty of this scene lies in how Santiago handles his newfound ability. He doesn't retreat into self-doubt or dismiss the vision as fantasy. Instead, he trusts what he has experienced and takes action. This is where Coelho shows us the difference between passive dreaming and active engagement with our destiny. Santiago has learned that the universe speaks to those who listen, but listening alone isn't enough. We must also have the courage to act on what we hear. When Santiago brings his vision to the tribal chieftains of the oasis, he faces the classic predicament of the prophet. Who is this young foreigner to claim knowledge of future events? Why should anyone believe his strange tale of talking hawks and mystical visions? Yet there's something in his manner, something in the conviction of his words, that gives them pause. It's the same quality we recognize in people who have touched something real and transformative. Their certainty isn't arrogant or boastful. It's simply unshakable because it comes from direct experience rather than mere belief. This episode marks a crucial turning point in Santiago's development. He's no longer just following his personal legend. He's becoming someone whose very presence affects the world around him. His growing powers aren't just personal achievements, but tools for serving something larger than himself. It's reminiscent of how true expertise in any field eventually transcends personal benefit and becomes a gift to others. The master craftsman doesn't just make beautiful objects for profit. They preserve and pass on traditions that enrich human culture. As we witness Santiago's transformation from shepherd to mystic, from dreamer to visionary, we're reminded that our own journeys toward authenticity often involve similar moments of expanded awareness. The question isn't whether we'll encounter opportunities to see beyond the surface of things, but whether we'll have the courage to trust what we see and act upon it, even when others cannot yet understand what we've discovered. Picture this moment. Santiago has traveled across deserts, worked in crystal shops, joined caravans, and fallen in love. He's learned about omens, listened to his heart, and discovered that the treasure he seeks might be closer than he ever imagined. But just when he thinks he understands the journey, life introduces him to the most enigmatic teacher of all. It's like when you think you've mastered something, and then you meet someone who shows you depths you never knew existed. This is Santiago's encounter with the alchemist. The alchemist appears almost like a mirage at first, emerging from the desert landscape as if he's been waiting there all along. Think about those moments in your own life when the right teacher appeared at exactly the right time. Maybe it was a professor who changed your perspective, a mentor who saw potential you didn't know you had, or even a stranger whose words stuck with you for years. The timing never feels coincidental, does it? There's something almost mystical about how wisdom finds us when we're truly ready to receive it. What strikes me most about this meeting is how the alchemist doesn't introduce himself with credentials or grand proclamations. He simply knows. He knows about Santiago's journey, his dreams, his fears, and most importantly, his destiny. This isn't some supernatural power, though it might seem that way. The alchemist has walked this path before. He recognizes the signs because he's lived them. It's like how an experienced parent can predict their teenager's next move, or how a seasoned entrepreneur can spot potential in a nervous startup founder. Experience creates a kind of intuitive knowing that transcends ordinary observation. The alchemist speaks in the language of the desert, of wind and sun and sand. But here's what's fascinating about his teaching style. He doesn't lecture Santiago about the meaning of life or hand him a roadmap to enlightenment. Instead, he shows him how to read the world differently. He teaches Santiago that everything in the universe is connected, that the same force that moves the planets also beats in our hearts. Now, think about this for a moment. In our hyperconnected digital age, we often feel more isolated than ever. Yet the alchemist's wisdom reminds us that connection isn't about Wi-Fi signals or social media followers. It's about recognizing the fundamental unity that runs through everything. One of the most powerful concepts the alchemist introduces is the idea that when you want something, the entire universe conspires to help you achieve it. This isn't some feel-good platitude or manifestation magic. It's about alignment. When you're truly committed to something meaningful, when you're willing to pay the price and stay the course, you start noticing opportunities that were always there. You meet people who can help. Doors open that seemed locked before. It's like when you're thinking about buying a particular car, and suddenly you see that model everywhere. The cars were always there. Your attention has simply shifted. The alchemist also teaches Santiago about the soul of the world, this universal language that connects all things. In today's terms, we might call this emotional intelligence, or systems thinking, or even what some people describe as flow states. It's that feeling when you're so tuned in to what's happening around you that you seem to anticipate everything perfectly. Athletes talk about being in the zone. Musicians describe jamming sessions where everyone just knows what comes next. Entrepreneurs speak of market timing that feels almost supernatural. These aren't accidents. They're examples of people learning to read the deeper currents that flow beneath surface appearances. But here's where the alchemist's teaching gets really practical. He doesn't just talk about mystical unity. He shows Santiago how to transform lead into gold. And no, this isn't about literal metal transformation. The real alchemy is personal transformation. It's about taking the raw material of your experiences, your fears, your dreams, your failures, and transmuting them into wisdom, courage, and purpose. Every setback becomes a setup. Every challenge becomes a chance to grow stronger. Every loss becomes a lesson that prepares you for greater gains. The alchemist understands something that our achievement-obsessed culture often misses. The treasure isn't just the destination, it's who you become on the journey. Santiago could have stayed in Spain as a shepherd, dreaming about pyramids and treasure. He could have settled for the comfortable life with the crystal merchant. He could have remained in the oasis with Fatima. But each time he chose to keep moving, to keep growing, to keep following his personal legend, he was performing alchemy on himself. As we prepare to follow Santiago into the final stages of his transformation, remember that the alchemist represents that voice within each of us that knows our true potential. Sometimes it whispers through intuition. Sometimes it shouts through crisis. But it's always there, waiting for us to listen, ready to guide us toward the treasure that can only be found by those brave enough to seek it. Picture this. You're sitting in a vast desert, nothing but endless dunes stretching to the horizon, and suddenly you realize that this seemingly empty landscape is actually alive, breathing, speaking to you in a language older than words. This is exactly where Santiago finds himself in one of the most profound sections of his journey. And honestly, it's where Paulo Coelho drops some of the most life-changing wisdom in the entire book. So we've got Santiago traveling with the alchemist through this desert, and at first glance you might think, well, what could a bunch of sand possibly teach anyone? But here's where Coelho gets absolutely brilliant. The desert becomes Santiago's greatest teacher, not despite its silence, but because of it. You see, when we strip away all the noise, all the distractions, all the constant chatter of modern life, that's when we can finally hear what our hearts have been trying to tell us all along. Now think about this for a moment. When was the last time you sat in complete silence? Not scrolling through your phone, not listening to a podcast, not planning your next move, just sitting there, listening. It's terrifying, isn't it? We've become so addicted to external stimulation that we've forgotten how to tune into our internal compass. But Santiago learns something incredible in that desert silence. He discovers that his heart has been speaking to him his entire life. He just never knew how to listen. The alchemist teaches Santiago that the heart speaks in the language of omens, signs, and feelings that we often dismiss as coincidence or imagination. Remember when you had that gut feeling about taking a different route home, and later you found out there was a massive accident on your usual path? Or when something just felt right about a person you just met, and they ended up becoming one of your closest friends? That's your heart speaking the same language Santiago learns in the desert. But here's where it gets really fascinating. Coelho introduces this concept called the soul of the world, this idea that everything in the universe is connected, that there's this invisible network of energy and information flowing between all living things. Now, before you roll your eyes and think this sounds too mystical, consider this. Modern science is actually catching up to what ancient wisdom has always known. Quantum physics talks about entanglement. Ecology shows us how every organism affects every other organism. And neuroscience is discovering that our brains are constantly picking up subtle cues from our environment that we're not even consciously aware of. Santiago learns to tap into this universal language, and it's not through some magical ritual or secret technique. It's through paying attention. Really, truly paying attention. The alchemist shows him how the wind carries messages, how the desert itself has moods and rhythms, how even the silence speaks volumes. And suddenly, Santiago realizes that he's not alone in this vast emptiness. He's part of something infinitely larger and more connected than he ever imagined. This is where the story becomes deeply practical for us today. We live in cities made of concrete and steel, surrounded by screens and notifications, but that same soul of the world is still speaking to us. It's in the way certain opportunities seem to appear just when we need them most. It's in those moments when you meet exactly the right person at exactly the right time. It's in the way nature responds to our presence when we actually take the time to notice. Santiago's desert education teaches him that communication with the soul of the world isn't about speaking, it's about becoming. When he wants to turn himself into the wind later in the story, he doesn't do it through force or willpower. He does it by understanding his place in the greater whole, by aligning himself with the natural flow of energy that connects all things. Think about the most successful people you know, the ones who seem to have this uncanny ability to be in the right place at the right time, who make decisions that just seem to work out. They're not necessarily smarter or more talented than everyone else. They've learned to listen to that same voice Santiago discovers in the desert. They've developed what we might call intuitive intelligence, the ability to read the subtle currents of life and move with them rather than against them. As Santiago's time in the desert deepens, he realizes that this communication with the soul of the world isn't a special gift reserved for alchemists and mystics. It's our birthright as human beings. We've just forgotten how to access it. The desert strips away everything unnecessary and reveals what's always been there, waiting patiently for us to remember how to listen. And that's perhaps the most beautiful lesson of all, that the wisdom we seek isn't somewhere out there in the world. It's already within us, speaking in the quiet moments between our thoughts, guiding us toward our own personal legends if we're brave enough to trust what we hear. So here we are, my friend, sitting together with our coffee growing cold as we reach the most intense moment of Santiago's journey. You know that feeling when you're watching a movie and you can sense the climax building? That's exactly where we find ourselves in The Alchemist. Santiago has traveled across continents, learned from wise men, fallen in love, and discovered treasures beyond his wildest dreams. But now comes the ultimate test, the one that separates dreamers from achievers, the moment when Santiago must face his deepest, most primal fear. Picture this scene with me. Santiago stands before a military encampment in the desert, surrounded by armed men who view him with suspicion and hostility. The tribal chieftains demand proof that he possesses the magical powers they've heard whispered about. It's not enough anymore to simply say he's an alchemist or to rely on the reputation of others. Now he must demonstrate his mastery, and the stakes couldn't be higher. His life literally hangs in the balance. But here's what's fascinating about this moment and why Silho chose it as Santiago's final test. The young shepherd isn't being asked to perform some elaborate magic trick or recite ancient formulas. Instead, he's being challenged to do something far more terrifying and profound. He must transform himself into the wind. Now, think about this for a moment. What does it really mean to become the wind? On the surface, it sounds impossible, almost ridiculous. But Silho is asking us to look deeper, to understand that this isn't really about meteorology or supernatural powers. Santiago's conversation with the wind, the sun, and the desert itself becomes one of the most beautiful passages in the entire book. He doesn't approach these elements as a master commanding servants, but as a student seeking wisdom from ancient teachers. When he speaks to the wind, he talks about love, about his connection to Fatima, about how love transforms everything it touches. The wind, initially skeptical, begins to understand that Santiago isn't trying to control nature, but to become one with it. This reminds me of something I've noticed in my own life, and maybe you've experienced this too. Have you ever been so completely absorbed in an activity that you lost all sense of self? Maybe you were painting or writing or playing music, or even having an intense conversation with someone you love. Suddenly, hours have passed, and you realize you weren't thinking about yourself at all. You had become the activity itself. That's the state Santiago reaches when he transforms into the wind. He stops trying to be Santiago the shepherd boy and becomes Santiago the force of nature. The practical wisdom here is profound and immediately applicable to our modern lives. How often do we fail at something because we're too focused on our own limitations, our own fears, our own small sense of self? Santiago succeeds because he expands his identity beyond the narrow confines of who he thinks he is. He realizes that the same force that moves the wind, that burns in the sun, that shapes the desert, also flows through him. Think about the entrepreneurs who have changed the world. Steve Jobs didn't just see himself as a computer programmer. He saw himself as someone who could bend reality to his vision. Oprah Winfrey didn't limit herself to being a talk show host. She became a force for transformation in people's lives. They learned what Santiago learns in this crucial moment, that our greatest limitations are often self-imposed, created by our narrow definitions of what we're capable of achieving. But Santiago's transformation isn't just about personal power. It's about connection, about understanding that we're part of something infinitely larger than ourselves. When he becomes the wind, he's not conquering nature, he's joining it. He's discovering what mystics and philosophers have taught for centuries, that the boundaries between self and world are largely illusions. The tribal chieftains, witnessing this impossible transformation, don't just see magic. They see proof of something they've always suspected but never dared to believe, that human beings are capable of transcending their apparent limitations when they align themselves with the fundamental forces of the universe. Santiago's feat becomes a mirror, reflecting back their own untapped potential. As we watch Santiago complete this final test, we're witnessing more than just the climax of an adventure story. We're seeing a profound lesson about courage, about the difference between being afraid and letting fear control us. Santiago is terrified, but he acts anyway. He doesn't wait until he feels confident or until someone gives him permission. He steps into the unknown and discovers that the universe rises to meet him. This sets us up perfectly for the final revelation that awaits Santiago, the moment when all his searching and struggling finally pays off in ways he never could have imagined. But that's a conversation for our next cup of coffee, when we'll discover together what treasures await those brave enough to follow their dreams to the very end. Picture this moment with me. Santiago has traveled across continents, crossed deserts, learned the language of the wind, and transformed himself into the very elements of nature. He's been robbed, beaten, and left for dead in the Egyptian sands. And now, after all this incredible journey, after discovering powers he never knew he possessed, he's digging frantically at the base of the pyramids, searching for treasure that a dream promised him years ago. But here's where Coelho delivers one of literature's most beautiful ironies. The treasure isn't there. Instead, Santiago encounters refugees who rob him of his remaining gold and mock his quest. One of them, almost casually, mentions that he too once had a recurring dream about treasure. But his dream was about gold buried beneath a sycamore tree in an abandoned church in Spain, in a place called Andalusia. The same church where Santiago used to sleep with his sheep. The same tree where his journey began. Now, think about this for a moment. Isn't this exactly how life works? We often spend years, sometimes decades, searching for something that was right there all along. We chase opportunities across the globe while ignoring the potential in our own backyard. We seek wisdom from distant gurus while overlooking the insights our own experiences have already provided us. I'm reminded of a friend who spent 10 years climbing corporate ladders in different cities, always convinced that the next promotion, the next company, the next location would bring fulfillment. It wasn't until she returned to her hometown to care for her aging parents that she discovered her true calling in community organizing, something that had been available to her all along, but that she dismissed as too ordinary, too familiar. The treasure's location reveals one of the most profound truths about personal growth and self-discovery. Sometimes we need to travel far from home to appreciate what home truly offers. Sometimes we need to become strangers to ourselves before we can recognize who we really are. Santiago couldn't have simply dug under that tree at the beginning of his story and found the treasure. He needed to become the person capable of recognizing treasure when he saw it. This is what psychologists call the paradox of seeking. The very act of looking for something changes us, and often what we find isn't what we were originally seeking, but something far more valuable. Santiago set out looking for gold, but what he discovered was his own capacity for transformation, his ability to communicate with the universe, his understanding of love, and his connection to what Coelho calls his personal legend. Consider how this plays out in our modern world. How many entrepreneurs have traveled the globe seeking the perfect business opportunity, only to return home and create something amazing using resources and connections they'd always had? How many artists have studied in prestigious schools and exotic locations, only to find their authentic voice when they return to their roots and paint what they know? The location of the treasure also speaks to something deeper about the nature of wisdom and spiritual growth. In many mystical traditions, there's this understanding that enlightenment isn't something you acquire from outside yourself. It's something you uncover within. The Sufi poets, who heavily influenced Coelho's writing, often spoke of the beloved being closer than your own jugular vein. The treasure was always there, but Santiago needed eyes to see it. What makes this revelation even more powerful is that Santiago doesn't feel cheated or angry about the irony. He laughs. He understands that the journey wasn't a detour from finding the treasure, it was the only way to find it. Without his adventures, without learning to read the omens, without understanding the language of the world, that gold buried under the tree would have remained just gold. Now it represents something infinitely more valuable, proof that when you pursue your personal legend, the universe conspires to help you. This connects to something we see repeatedly in our own lives. The career change that seems like a step backward often leads to the breakthrough. The relationship that ends opens space for the love of your life. The failure that feels devastating teaches you exactly what you need to know for your next success. The treasure is often buried right where our journey began, but we can only recognize it after we've traveled far enough to see it with new eyes. As we prepare to explore how Santiago returns to claim this treasure and what it ultimately means for his transformation, remember that Coelho isn't just telling us a story about a Spanish shepherd. He's revealing something essential about how growth works, how dreams manifest, and how the universe responds when we have the courage to follow our hearts, even when the path leads us in circles that eventually bring us home. So here we are, sitting with our coffee, watching Santiago make his way back across the desert, and something extraordinary has happened. Remember that eager shepherd boy who left Andalusia with nothing but dreams and a handful of sheep money? Well, he's returning as someone completely different, carrying not just a pouch of gold, but something far more precious, the kind of wisdom that can only come from following your personal legend to its very end. Now think about this for a moment. How many times have you heard someone say, "It's not about the destination, it's about the journey"? We roll our eyes, right? It sounds like something you'd find on a motivational poster. But Santiago's return journey shows us exactly why this cliché became a cliché in the first place, because it's profoundly true. The gold he's carrying is almost secondary to what he's discovered about himself, about the universe, and about the interconnectedness of all things. As Santiago travels back through Morocco, through Spain, back toward that sycamore tree where his journey began, he's not the same person who once slept under that tree dreaming of treasure. He's learned to read the omens, to listen to his heart, to understand what the alchemist meant when he said that when you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you achieve it. But here's what's fascinating. And this is where Coelho's genius really shines. Santiago realizes that the treasure was always there, right where he started. The recurring dream, the gypsy's prophecy, the old king's words, they were all pointing him back to where he began, but he had to make the entire journey to become worthy of finding it. This reminds me of something that happens in our modern world all the time. Think about those tech entrepreneurs who drop out of college, travel the world, fail at multiple startups, learn hard lessons about business and life, and then return to their hometown to build something incredible using everything they've learned. They couldn't have built that success without leaving first, without the failures, without the transformation that comes from pursuing something bigger than yourself. Santiago's return is also a masterclass in how wisdom changes us. When he encounters the thieves at the pyramids, the very ones who beat him and inadvertently revealed the location of his treasure, he doesn't seek revenge. He's not bitter. Instead, he sees them as part of his story, part of the cosmic plan that led him to his personal legend. This is the kind of perspective shift that only comes from truly understanding that everything happens for a reason, that even our setbacks and failures are stepping stones to something greater. But let's talk about what Santiago does with his newfound wealth and wisdom. He doesn't just sit on his gold and retire to a life of luxury. No, he becomes someone who can help others on their own journeys. He's learned the universal language that the Alchemist spoke about, the language of the world that connects all things. He can now read the signs, understand the omens, and most importantly, he can encourage others to pursue their own personal legends. This is where the story becomes incredibly relevant to our Instagram age, our LinkedIn hustle culture, our constant comparison with others' highlight reels. Santiago's transformation teaches us that real success isn't about accumulating wealth or achievements to impress others. It's about becoming who you're meant to be. The gold he finds is almost symbolic. It represents the abundance that flows into your life when you're aligned with your purpose, when you're living authentically, when you've done the inner work required to become your truest self. Now here's something beautiful about Santiago's return that often gets overlooked. He doesn't come back preaching or trying to convert everyone to his way of thinking. He simply embodies what he's learned. His presence, his peace, his understanding of life's deeper currents, these speak louder than any words could. This is the mark of true wisdom. It doesn't need to announce itself or seek validation. It simply is. The return journey also represents something we all face in our own lives, that moment when we have to integrate what we've learned in extraordinary circumstances back into ordinary life. Santiago has communed with the wind, spoken with the sun, understood the soul of the world. Now he has to figure out how to live with that knowledge in the everyday world of sheep and markets and village life. And this is perhaps the most practical lesson from Santiago's return. Transformation isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing process of remembering who you've become, of not slipping back into old patterns, of continuing to trust in the magic and possibility that you've discovered. Santiago's story ends, but his real journey, the journey of living as his transformed self, is just beginning. As we finish our coffee and close this chapter, we're reminded that every ending is really a beginning. Every return home is actually a departure into a new way of being in the world. You know, there's this beautiful moment near the end of The Alchemist, where Santiago realizes something profound about love and dreams, and it's one of those insights that just hits you right in the chest. We've been following this shepherd boy on his journey to find treasure, watching him fall in love with Fatima, learning about the soul of the world. And now Silho brings it all together in this gorgeous understanding about how personal dreams and love aren't opposing forces, but rather two streams that flow into the same river. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you heard someone say they had to choose between following their dreams and being with the person they love? It's like we've been programmed to believe that pursuing our personal legend means leaving everyone behind, that love is somehow a distraction from our true purpose. But Santiago's story shows us something completely different, something revolutionary in its simplicity. When Santiago meets Fatima at the Oasis, he's tempted to abandon his quest for the treasure. Here's this woman who understands him completely, who sees into his soul, and suddenly the pyramid in Egypt seems less important than staying in this desert paradise with her. Sound familiar? It's the classic dilemma we all face when love enters our lives. Do we compromise our dreams for love, or do we sacrifice love for our ambitions? But Fatima, wise beyond her years, tells Santiago something that changes everything. She says that if he truly loves her, he must continue his journey, because a man who doesn't follow his personal legend can never truly belong to her. Now, think about this. She's not being cruel or distant. She's expressing one of the deepest truths about love that most of us never fully grasp. Real love doesn't diminish when we pursue our dreams. It amplifies them. It becomes the wind beneath our wings rather than the anchor that holds us down. Fatima understands that Santiago's treasure isn't just some golden coins buried in the sand. His treasure is becoming who he's meant to be, and if she prevents that transformation, she's not loving him, she's loving a smaller version of him. This reminds me of those couples you see where both partners are thriving, where each person's success seems to fuel the other's growth. They're not competing or compromising. They're creating something together that's bigger than either could achieve alone. It's like a dance where each dancer's movements make the other more graceful, more powerful, more beautiful. But here's where Silho takes it even deeper. Santiago's journey isn't just about personal fulfillment. As he pursues his personal legend, he serves others along the way. He helps the crystal merchant revitalize his business by bringing fresh perspective and enthusiasm. He shares his knowledge with the desert tribes. He becomes part of the wind itself, connected to the universal language that speaks to all hearts. This is the integration Silho is showing us. When we follow our authentic path, we don't become selfish or isolated. We become more connected, more useful, more loving. It's like when you're truly passionate about something, you can't help but share that passion with others. Think about someone in your life who's living their purpose. Don't they seem to radiate something that lifts everyone around them? The treasure Santiago finds isn't just gold. It's the understanding that his personal legend was never separate from his capacity to love and serve. Every step of his journey prepared him to be a better partner to Fatima, a better contributor to his community, a better human being in the world. The boy who returns is not the same boy who left. He's been transformed by the pursuit of his dream, and that transformation is a gift he brings to everyone he encounters. In our modern world, we often talk about work-life balance as if these are competing forces that need to be carefully managed. But what if we've got it all wrong? What if the integration Santiago discovers is actually available to all of us? What if our deepest dreams and our capacity for love and service are all expressions of the same fundamental truth about who we are? Consider the entrepreneurs who build companies not just for profit, but to solve problems they care deeply about. Think about the artists whose work heals and inspires others. Look at the teachers, the healers, the builders who find ways to make their daily work an expression of love. They've found what Santiago found, this beautiful integration where personal fulfillment and service to others become one flowing river. As we move toward understanding how Santiago's story concludes, we're left with this powerful recognition that the greatest treasures aren't the ones we hoard for ourselves, but the ones that multiply when we share them, the ones that make us more capable of love, not less. Picture yourself sitting in your favorite cafe, steam rising from your coffee cup, as we dive into one of the most beautiful concepts Paulo Coelho weaves throughout The Alchemist. We're talking about the universal language, that mysterious thread that connects everything in existence. Now, you might be thinking, what exactly is this universal language? Is it some mystical code that only wise old alchemists can decipher? Well, grab your coffee a little tighter, because what Santiago discovers on his journey might just change how you see the world around you. When Santiago first encounters this idea, he's standing in the desert with the Englishman, watching the wind dance across the dunes. The Englishman is buried in his books, frantically searching for the secrets of alchemy in written words, while Santiago begins to understand something profound. The desert isn't just sand and silence, it's speaking. The wind carries messages. The sun tells stories. Even the stones beneath his feet have something to say. This isn't poetry or metaphor, though it sounds like it. Seelho is pointing to something we've all experienced but rarely acknowledge. Think about this for a moment. Haven't you ever walked into a room and immediately sensed tension, even though no one said a word? Haven't you felt drawn to certain places or repelled by others without any logical reason? That's the universal language at work. It's the way your dog seems to know you're sad before you even realize it yourself. It's how a mother can sense something's wrong with her child from miles away. It's that gut feeling that tells you to take a different route home, only to discover later that you avoided a massive traffic jam. Santiago learns that this language doesn't require translation because it speaks directly to the soul. When he watches the hawks circling overhead, he doesn't need an ornithology degree to understand that they're signaling something important about the oasis. The birds, the wind, the shifting sands, they're all part of an interconnected web of communication that transcends words. It's like nature has its own internet, and once you learn to log in, the information flow is incredible. Now, here's where it gets really interesting for us modern folk. We live in an age of instant communication, yet we've somehow become deaf to this ancient language that our ancestors understood intuitively. We check our phones for weather updates while ignoring the clouds gathering overhead. We rely on GPS navigation while forgetting how to read the natural signs that guided travelers for millennia. We've gained incredible technological tools, but lost touch with the subtle signals that surround us every day. But the universal language isn't just about reading nature's signs. Santiago discovers it's also the language of the heart, of intuition, of those moments when everything clicks into place. Remember when Santiago meets Fatima at the well. They don't need lengthy conversations to recognize their connection. Their souls speak the same language immediately. It's that instant recognition you feel when you meet someone and know, without explanation, that they're going to be important in your life. The beautiful paradox Seelho presents is that this most universal of languages is also the most personal. When Santiago learns to listen with his heart rather than his mind, he begins to understand not just the desert's messages, but his own deepest desires and fears. The language that connects him to everything external also connects him to everything internal. It's as if the universe is constantly whispering guidance, but we're usually too busy talking to hear it. Consider how this applies to your own life. Those moments of synchronicity when exactly the right person calls at exactly the right time, or when you stumble upon exactly the book or article you need to read. The universal language suggests these aren't coincidences but conversations. The world is trying to communicate with you, offering guidance, support, and direction, if only you're willing to listen. Santiago's journey teaches us that learning this language requires a kind of surrender. You can't force understanding the way the Englishman tries to do with his books and formulas. Instead, you have to become still enough, quiet enough, open enough to receive what's being offered. It's like tuning into a radio frequency that's always broadcasting, but requires the right kind of attention to hear clearly. As we move forward in Santiago's story, we'll see how mastering this universal language becomes essential not just for finding treasure, but for finding himself. Because ultimately, that's what this ancient wisdom offers us today, the ability to navigate life with a deeper sense of connection and purpose, reading the signs that point us toward our own personal legend. Santiago's journey from the Spanish countryside to the Egyptian pyramids isn't just about finding treasure. It's about discovering that the real treasure was always within him. Through his encounters with the king, the alchemist, and countless others, Seelho weaves a timeless message. When you truly want something, the entire universe conspires to help you achieve it. The book reminds us that our personal legend, our deepest calling, isn't some distant, impossible dream. It's the authentic path our heart knows we must walk. Santiago learns that omens surround us constantly, that love supports our journey rather than holding us back, and that the greatest alchemy happens not in turning lead to gold, but in transforming ourselves through courage and faith. Here are 5 key takeaways to carry forward. Listen to your heart, but understand its language. Your heart speaks through excitement, through that persistent whisper of what if. Start incredibly small. Spend 5 minutes each morning asking yourself what genuinely excites you today. Pay attention to what makes you lose track of time. Your heart knows your personal legend before your mind does. Treat obstacles as redirections, not rejections. When Santiago faces setbacks, each one teaches him something essential for his journey. The next time you hit a roadblock, pause and ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" Be patient with yourself as you look for the lesson rather than the frustration. Practice reading the omens around you. Seelho shows us that guidance comes through people, circumstances, and intuitive nudges. Start by noticing patterns, the book that keeps appearing in conversations, the opportunity that surfaces twice in 1 week. Keep a small journal of these coincidences and watch for themes. Embrace beginner's mind in your own expertise. Santiago succeeds partly because he approaches each new situation with openness. Whatever your field of knowledge, regularly ask yourself, what would I see here if I knew nothing? This fresh perspective often reveals opportunities that expertise blinds us to. Take the first step before the path becomes clear. Santiago leaves his comfortable life as a shepherd without knowing exactly how he'll reach the pyramids. The universe responds to movement, not just intention. Choose one small, concrete action toward your personal legend this week. The path reveals itself as you walk it, not before. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below with at least one idea from this book that stuck with you, one concept you're going to carry forward. It could be something that challenged your thinking, something you want to try, or even something you disagreed with. Your insight might be exactly what another listener needs to hear today. And if this summary gave you something valuable, a new perspective, a spark of motivation, or even just a peaceful hour with your coffee, share it with someone who might need it too. Subscribe to One Book, One Coffee, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a new summary. Every week, we sit down together with one great book, one warm cup of coffee, and the simple belief that wisdom, shared well, can change lives. Until next time, keep reading, keep growing, and remember, every small step counts. See you at the next book.